Hi, my name's Venus. I was told there wasn't enough space for me at our family retreat. Again, no call, no invite, just silence, and a flyer with my sister's name listed as creative director on a logo I designed. Turns out they'd quietly removed me from the family trust, erased my name from the estate, and rebranded our legacy without me. What happens when the people who raised you start rewriting the story without you? And what if, this time, you refuse to stay invisible? Let me tell you what really happened. The sun had just crept over the rooftops when I opened my eyes. Usually, mornings like this were loud. Group chats pinging nonstop with family updates, carpool plans, reminders to bring favorite dishes and games for the Ridge family retreat. But today? Silence. My phone was blank. No, can't wait to see you, from Amanda. No, bring your watercolor kit, from Lorraine. Just silence, and that awful hum that fills the room when no one's thinking of you. I didn't panic. Not yet. I padded barefoot to the kitchen, started the kettle, and scrolled through my inbox. Nothing. Not even junk mail. Not a whisper of a calendar invite. Not a message. I refreshed the page again. Then again. Finally, one email popped up in bold. Retreat info. I clicked it faster than I'd like to admit. It was from Mom. The body of the email read, "We've decided to keep this year's gathering intimate. Just the core family. We figured you'd appreciate the quiet. Love, Mom." I stared at the screen. The words blurred. Not because I was crying, but because I couldn't believe how casual she made it sound, like doing me a favor by cutting me out. I didn't hit reply. I didn't throw the mug across the room like I wanted to. I just sat there, kettle shrieking behind me, and let the water burn off on its own. Around noon, a cousin of mine, Tasha, sent me a DM on Instagram. Casual, like she didn't know what was happening. "Hey, your mom told Aunt Sharon you were taking a mental break. Didn't want the noise. Hope you're okay." Excuse me? That's when it hit me. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd rewritten the narrative so they wouldn't look bad. I wasn't the victim. I was unstable. I wasn't left out. I had opted out. Like they were doing me a kindness. That word, mental break, clung to the inside of my ribs like a splinter. I never said anything like that. No one asked me. No one even hinted at an invitation. I closed my phone and walked to the back room of my apartment. My studio. It wasn't fancy, just shelves stacked with paints and markers and 3 half-used sketchbooks, but it was mine. I pulled out one from the bottom shelf, the old one I used back when I was still in school. Flipping through it was like touching another life. There it was, a sketch of the Ridge Lake cabin from the summer I was 17. The porch railing I helped repaint, the rowboat Grandpa taught me to steer. None of it had changed, except me. I remembered one summer, maybe 3 years ago, they told me there was no room for a single adult, that all the cabins were full. The following week, I saw photos online. Aunts, uncles, even second cousins from New Jersey. Someone's college roommate had come, but apparently no room for me. Another year, I asked what time the shuttle left. They said they must have forgotten to book my flight. Said it like they'd misplaced a dinner fork. Just an oversight. And again, photos went up, smiling faces on the dock, kids running down the hill I used to paint from. There was always an excuse, always a logistical issue that somehow only applied to me. One time over dinner, my father leaned back and laughed, wine glass in hand. He looked right at me and said, "She's too sensitive for the real world. Let her paint." The room roared, even Lorraine. I smiled like it didn't land, but it did. It still does. I didn't cry that night either. I didn't scream, but that was the first time I felt something start to settle inside me, like a line being drawn, quiet and sharp. Now, years later, reading that email, seeing my own family sell me the same lie in a new wrapper, it didn't shock me, but it broke something final. I closed the sketchbook, pushed my chair back, and walked to the hall closet. I pulled out a small duffel, not a suitcase, just enough room for a few clothes, my tablet, charger, and one pair of decent shoes. No makeup bag. No jewelry. Just enough to disappear for a day or two, maybe. Then I opened my laptop and began drafting an email. Not to them, to myself. Subject line: "This ends here. No body text, just those words." I saved it as a draft, then deleted it from my sent folder. I didn't need them to see it. I just needed to mean it. As evening rolled in and the golden light crept across my apartment walls, I stood at the window looking out over the Denver skyline. Somewhere across the lake in Granby, they were setting up for another small, intimate gathering, probably stringing up lights and picking out wine, probably not even mentioning my name. But I wasn't going to let that be the story this year. I turned off the light, picked up my sketchbook again, and flipped to the back. A blank page. Clean. Room for something new. I didn't sleep well the night after I packed my bag. Even after shutting my laptop and pushing my phone face down on the counter, my thoughts kept humming, circling the same ache like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline the following evening, I'd barely left the apartment. I kept pacing, between the kitchen and the window, back to the table, where my sketchbook still lay open to a blank page. Still no plan. Just that stubborn knot in my chest that said, "Not this year." Around 9, I made tea I didn't drink and took it out onto the balcony. The night was warm but quiet, the kind that usually calms me down. But not that night. That night, I did what I shouldn't have done. I opened Instagram. It started like it always does, tapping through random stories, mostly friends from college, ads for ceramic paint sets, photos of dogs and bandanas. Then I saw it, a grainy photo from my cousin Hannah's feed. It was a picture of the welcome table at the Ridge Family Retreat. A laminated sign stood front and center. Annual Ridge Family Retreat. Confirmed attendees, 97. I blinked. 97. Not 20. Not just the core family, like Mom's email had claimed. I tapped to pause the story and zoomed in. The image was blurry, but the names were real. There was Lorraine, of course, and Amanda, all their spouses. Even Great-Uncle Howard, who lives 3 states away and hasn't remembered my name since 2004. And right there, just under special guests, Silas Cray. Silas. My stomach dropped. The same man my parents had forbidden me to see after college. "He's not Ridge material," Dad had said, whatever that meant. I hadn't spoken to Silas in years, but there he was, smiling in the photo below that post, arms slung casually around Amanda's husband, like they were old fraternity brothers. I stared at the screen until my tea went cold. Then I picked up my phone and, before I could think better of it, typed out a message to Lorraine. Didn't realize we were inviting ghosts now. I didn't expect her to reply, and she didn't. I kept scrolling. The next post was a video, a short clip from the first dinner. Lorraine stood at the head of the long table set up by the lake, glass of wine in hand, her voice perfectly modulated for effect. "To family," she said, raising her glass. "The ones who show up and always make space." They clinked glasses, laughed, cheered. I just sat there, phone in hand, in a silence that felt louder than anything I'd ever heard. It was never about space. It was never about logistics. It was about control, about optics, about curating who belonged and who didn't. The more I thought about it, the more the memories started lining up like dominoes. I remembered the bridal shower I wasn't told about, the Christmas card they posted where I was photoshopped out, cropped for layout, they'd claimed, the baby shower where my RSVP got lost, and Lorraine had smiled and said, "Oh, we figured you were probably busy with whatever it is you do." This wasn't a one-off. This was a pattern, and this time, they'd just done it in public. They'd put the list in writing, they'd posted the photos, they'd toasted to the people who always make space, and they knew I'd see it. That's when the hurt started turning into something else. Not rage, no, that would have been easy, but clarity. Cold and clear. They weren't sorry. They weren't hiding it. They were proud of it. They were shaping the story where I didn't exist. And they were hoping I'd be too ashamed or too exhausted to contradict it. That meant I didn't owe them silence anymore. I stood up from the balcony chair, went inside, and powered up my laptop. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Retreat, My Version. No documents inside yet, no images, no sketches, just the name. But that was enough. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't reacting. I was designing. I didn't know what this was going to become yet. I didn't know how big or small it needed to be. All I knew was I couldn't stay invisible and also expect to be remembered. If they were going to write me out of their version of this family, I was going to make sure I had mine. With my own words, my own art, my own table. However small, however quiet. I shut the laptop, laid down on the couch, and stared at the ceiling. They'd made their message loud. I'd make mine clear. After shutting the laptop and letting the silence settle around me, I spent most of the next day in a strange sort of limbo. I didn't paint. I didn't answer calls. I didn't even go down to check the mail. Instead, I drifted. Through thoughts, unfinished ideas, half-buried memories that started crawling back now that I had opened the door. That night, I didn't sleep much. And the next morning, instead of trying to push through the fog with caffeine and fake productivity, I tossed a few things into a backpack, grabbed a water bottle, and drove west, out toward the hills that curved around the edges of Granby. I didn't head toward Ridge House. I didn't even consider it. Instead, I followed a smaller road that led to an old trail I used to walk when I stayed with Grandpa as a kid. It wasn't far from where the retreat was being held, but it might as well have been a different world. That house by the lake? It was once where I learned to draw. I remember the exact day. I was 8. Grandpa had handed me a sketch pad, not some childish coloring book, but the real thing, and said, "What you see matters, Venus. Capture it before it disappears." It had never occurred to me that things could vanish until he said it like that. At the time, I thought he meant sunsets or shadows, or the way pine trees looked when the light hit them in the evening. But now, standing near the same path I used to walk barefoot, I knew better. He'd meant everything, places, people, the way a family once felt. I sat on a boulder under a familiar pine, one I had drawn dozens of times before, and took out my phone. It was habit by now, scrolling just to keep the restlessness at bay. But that habit came with consequences. A short video clip popped up in my feed. Not from Lorraine directly, of course, but tagged by one of her friends. It was a drone shot, clean, slow, and professionally edited. The caption read, "Our family's legacy, reimagined. Welcome to Ridge House." I didn't need the sound. The visuals were enough. New signage, faux rustic fencing, whitewashed siding. The wraparound porch had been extended and fitted with modern lighting. And at the edge of the lake, a pergola had been added. It looked like something out of a catalog. Then the shot panned to the lawn. A group of people gathered under a tent. Lorraine stood in front, holding a paintbrush. Her voice carried in that familiar way she used when she was about to perform sincerity. A subtitle overlaid the video read, "A Family Tradition of Creativity." I dropped my phone. My hand was still shaking when I picked it up. My breath was shallow. For a moment, I thought I might pass out. That place, our place, had been made over like a backdrop for a brand partnership. It didn't even look like the home I remembered. And now it was being used as the symbol of legacy, led by the same sister who made sure I had no seat at the table. I didn't hesitate. I tapped Lorraine's name and hit call. She picked up on the second ring. "Wow," I said without a hello. "That video looks great. Ridge House? That what we're calling it now?" She didn't pause. "It's not just me, Venus. Everyone agreed it needed a refresh." "You mean everyone you let in the door?" A quiet beat. I took a breath. "Why didn't you just tell me you didn't want me there?" "I'm not stupid, Lorraine." Her tone dropped, flat and polished. "Because that's not how this works. We choose what energy we invite. You're complicated." There it was. Polite cruelty. The kind that makes you question whether you've imagined the knife being twisted. Before I could respond, she hung up. I didn't scream, didn't call her back. I just sat there, thumb resting on the screen, realizing the weight of what had just been said. Complicated. That word was their favorite lately. A tidy label for people who refused to play along, who remembered things others preferred to forget, who didn't smile through humiliation or disappear quietly. By late afternoon, I was still in the same spot, trying to steady myself when I stood and began to walk. I followed the trail up a slope that ended near the ridge above the lake. There, just barely in view through a line of trees, was Ridge House. From this distance, it looked serene, picturesque, the kind of place tourists would book for authentic lake experiences. But to me, it looked hollow, like a memory that had been edited so heavily it no longer resembled the truth. I found the old pine tree I used to draw from. I sat down at its base, let my fingers rest in the dirt. The view used to be wide open here. Now it was lined with fences. New no trespassing signs were posted. Even the lake, something I once believed belonged to all of us, felt like it had been privatized. I took out my phone again, not to scroll, this time to speak. I opened the voice memo app and hit record. "This place raised me," I said softly, watching the sun start to dip behind the trees. "But I don't live here anymore. And if no one remembers me in their story, I'll make sure I don't forget myself." I didn't know who the message was for yet, but I knew I needed it. As I hiked back to the car, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, assuming it was spam. But then a text came through. "Check your email. You should know what they've really done." Back in the driver's seat, heart thumping low and slow, I opened my inbox. There it was. No subject. One attachment. A PDF. Legal letterhead. The PDF loaded slowly. My Canyon cell signal was weak, and I hadn't joined Wi-Fi yet. When the page finally opened, my chest tightened. I hadn't expected to see my own handwriting. There it was. A beautifully styled event flyer for the Ridge Retreat, framed with watercolor florals. Beneath it, an itinerary, speaker list, and a color-coordinated menu. And right in the center, my logo. Not something similar. Not a knockoff. Mine. Every detail matched the original design I'd created 5 years ago. A personal branding school project. I'd redesigned the Ridge Retreat identity just for fun, as a tribute to something that used to matter to me. I never published it. I'd only shared it with Lorraine. She'd asked to see it, for reference, to pitch to Dad. Now, there it was, stripped of my name. Under the logo, Creative Director, Lorraine Duval. I sat still, the screen glowing in my face. I let it hit me. Not just stolen, rewritten. I wasn't just omitted, I'd been replaced. I called my mother, not Lorraine. I needed clarity first. She picked up quickly, sweet as always. "Did you know they used my logo for the retreat?" I asked calmly. A pause. Not confusion, just calculation. "Well, that was years ago," she said lightly. "I assumed you'd moved on. Lorraine had it cleaned up professionally." "I made that," I said. "It was mine." She sighed. "Honey, don't make this a scene. You always read conflict where there isn't any." I hung up, not out of anger, but to avoid giving her words she'd twist later. I'd been down that road before. "She's reactive," they'd say, always so dramatic. I opened a folder on my old Gmail, Retreat Rebrand. There it was. Every file, sketch, timestamp, and draft. Proof it was mine. I uploaded everything to a private Google Drive titled Legacy Theft, Ridge Retreat 2.0x. I wasn't planning to go public, yet. I just needed the truth in one place, before it got rewritten again. At the bottom of an old sketchbook, I found the original pencil draft. In the margin, I'd written, "Ridge Legacy, not a brand, a promise." I'd believed that once, that families didn't erase each other, that if you made something beautiful, it would be recognized. That legacy meant truth. Then came a new email. No subject. One attachment. A screenshot of an internal memo. The sender. From Wendell Ridge to Legal Ridge Holdings. Subject. Estate consideration. Executorship. I read the text slowly. Given Venus's history with emotional volatility and inconsistent career direction, I believe it's in the family's best interest to finalize Lorraine as sole executor of the Ridge property and brand assets. I'd like this expedited before the next retreat. Emotional volatility. Not inclusion, not conversation, just dismissal. I wasn't just forgotten, I was disqualified, labeled unstable, dangerous to the brand. The irony was sharp. They'd erased me, then blamed me for not being there. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just felt cold. Years ago, I might have doubted myself, let their words shake my sense of reality. But not anymore. I wasn't unstable, I was inconvenient. And inconvenient people don't fit into neat family narratives. They get edited out. I walked slowly around my apartment. The walls were bare, except for 3 of my framed works. None of them hung perfectly. I'd never used a level. I liked seeing where things tilted on their own. Back at my desk, I searched my legal contacts and found a name. Elizabeth Marrow, a friend's intellectual property attorney. I didn't call her, not yet. I wasn't planning to sue, but I was done pretending it didn't matter. The knock came before sunrise. I was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop still open from the night before, when I heard the soft, almost tentative sound against the door. I hadn't ordered anything, and no one in my life showed up this early without texting first. So I waited a second, hesitant, then got up slowly and peered through the peephole. A courier? Anonymous. No uniform, no company badge. Just a man in a windbreaker holding a padded envelope with my name handwritten on the front. He didn't speak, just nodded once and left. Inside was a folded letter and a black flash drive taped to a piece of cardstock. No signature. Just one sentence typed in plain black font. You'll want to see this before you act. There was no hesitation in me anymore. Not the kind that used to keep me second-guessing. I walked straight to my desk, powered up the laptop again, and inserted the drive. The file launched automatically. A video. Grainy, time-stamped, and unmistakably real. There he was, Grandpa Robert, sitting in his weathered chair on the ridge porch, the old cedar frame creaking beneath him. He was wearing the same tan cardigan he always wore when the air got cooler, the one that smelled like pine and pipe tobacco. The camera was shaky at first, then steadied, as if someone had finally set it down on a nearby railing. His voice was softer than I remembered, but full of that old weight. Some things don't belong in contracts, he said. They belong in memory. And I hope this place, when I'm gone, is held by someone who remembers why we built it. He looked off to the side, and then, gently, as if he were reminding the wind itself, Venus, you'll be the one to carry this. You see it differently. There was a small laugh behind the camera. Mine. The date stamp was clear, 6 months before he passed. I watched it twice, then once more. Not because I needed convincing, but because I wanted to feel it, to absorb the sound of his voice as a form of armor, to remind myself that someone, once, had seen me, had believed in what I saw. By the time the screen dimmed again, the sun had started to rise, brushing across the walls of my apartment. I opened a new folder on my desktop, titled it Proof, Granby 200X. Inside, I dragged the scan of the original will, screenshots of my logo sketches, email chains with Lorraine, my time-stamped Illustrator files, the PDF of Dad's memo to the lawyer. And now, this video. I sent the folder to Elizabeth Marrow, the IP attorney. I didn't include a request, just a subject line. We need to talk. An hour later, she called. Her voice was calm, clipped, and exactly what I needed. The document you received, the will, it's valid, she said. Fully notarized, never legally rescinded. It's still logged in county records, Which means, I still have legal ownership? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. At least 1/3, she confirmed. And the moral high ground. They'll have a tough time spinning this without getting messy. I leaned back in my chair. The apartment was quiet again, but this silence didn't feel like erasure. It felt earned. Can we hold off on any formal action? I asked. For now? Of course, she said, but you should start documenting any public usage of the branding, press kits, media coverage, that kind of thing. I'm already on it. And I was. I opened the Google Drive folder I'd created days earlier, Retreat, my version, and renamed it Reclamation. There was still no grand plan, but there was movement, a slow, deliberate build toward something bigger than retaliation. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a reckoning, not just for me, but for the truth. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted to exist. That afternoon, I went through my inbox again, scanning for updates from Ridge Holdings, the family's LLC. Their website still listed Lorraine as creative director, with no mention of me. The press release about the new rebrand was full of language that made my stomach turn. An evolution of tradition. Rooted in family, reimagined for the future. I clicked on the contact form and left a message. You've failed to credit the original artist behind your visual identity. Documents available upon request. Then I hit send. Later that evening, after taking a walk through City Park and clearing my head, I returned to find a voicemail on my phone. It was Lorraine. You're seriously going to make this about a logo? Venus, come on! This is just your pattern, isn't it? Blowing things out of proportion, dragging the rest of us through your drama. We've all tiptoed around you for years. Maybe it's time you asked why. I didn't respond. I wouldn't. Not to her. Instead, I crafted a single text and sent it to her direct line. If you plan on standing in front of the family this weekend, you might want to check who still owns the stage. It was never about space. It was about erasure. And I was done being erased. After sending that text to Lorraine, I didn't sit and wait for a response. I opened my laptop, found the folder labeled Reclamation, and exported a short compilation video I'd edited the night before. Silent, less than 2 minutes, and deliberate. Footage of my sketchbook pages, the time-stamped Illustrator files, the scanned will with my name circled. A slow fade-in of Grandpa's video, just the moment he says, Venus, you'll be the one to carry this. Then black screen. I uploaded it to a private Instagram account I'd created the week prior. Legacy rewritten. No hashtags, no commentary, just a caption. The truth isn't complicated, it's just inconvenient. I set the privacy to restricted, only a handful of followers. Lorraine, Dad, 2 of my cousins. I wanted them to see it, not the world, not yet. This wasn't for public applause. It was a warning. I put my phone down, made a cup of coffee, and stepped out onto the balcony. It was already warm, too warm for May, and the neighborhood was slowly waking up. Dog walkers, the humming garbage truck, someone starting a lawnmower far off in the distance. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Blocked number, voicemail. Dad. Venus, I saw what you posted. Let me be very clear. You don't understand how any of this works. You're playing with matches near gasoline. You don't want to start a public fight you can't win. He paused, long enough that I could hear him take a breath, not out of sadness, out of frustration. Family matters stay inside the family. Don't forget that. I didn't flinch. I didn't delete it. I forwarded the message to my attorney. Then I texted Dad back. Then you shouldn't have turned me into a stranger. It wasn't a dramatic line. It was the plain truth. And if there's one thing men like my father hate more than defiance, it's clarity. Later that afternoon, a new email arrived from Lorraine. The subject line, clarification. Of course it was. She never called. She never asked how I was. Just typed her words like a PR rep calming a minor scandal. As the creative lead on this year's retreat, I was unaware you felt ownership of the original design. I was under the impression it was a shared legacy contribution. Please let me know if this is a legal matter. I stared at the screen. My hands didn't shake. I didn't hesitate. I replied with no greeting, no closing. Ownership is a fact, not a feeling. I didn't wait for her next move. I set up a face-to-face with Elizabeth, my attorney. I needed a real conversation, not just about paperwork, but about lines, boundaries, what could and couldn't be done, what should and shouldn't be said out loud. We met at her office just outside downtown. It was a quiet space, neat, professional, full of muted tones and clean lines. She poured coffee without asking, which I appreciated. I don't want to sue, I told her, after laying out all the files. You don't have to, she said, but we should draw a line, a legal one. She suggested a cease and desist, no public use of my design, no marketing that implied unanimous family legacy, and a demand that my name be restored as a founding creative on anything that used my original work. It wasn't revenge. It was architecture. It was rebuilding the ground beneath my own name. The letter went out that evening, not aggressive, just precise. That night, as I was brushing my teeth, I got 3 separate DMs from cousins, people who hadn't messaged me in years. We always knew that was your logo. Thanks for standing up for yourself. Some of us wish we had. Lorraine told the interns to scrub your name from everything this week. I thought you should know. The last one included a screenshot from an internal Slack thread. Lorraine's profile pic next to a message that read, "Make sure Venus's name isn't referenced during the art tour. We're avoiding tension." Avoiding tension. As if my existence was a scheduling issue. I didn't reply to any of them, but I did screenshot it and save it in my folder. Titled it, Intent to Erase. That was Friday evening. By Saturday morning, I was in my car, bags packed. Not heading to Ridge House, but nearby. I'd rented a small Airbnb cabin on the opposite side of the lake. Simple, 2-bedroom, screened porch, a view of the water just far enough that I could see the lights from Ridge House across the way, but not the faces. I didn't blast music on the drive. I didn't call anyone. I let the quiet do what it does when it's earned, not feared. When I pulled up to the cabin, it was just past noon. A handful of cars were already parked along the road, retreat guests. Some were walking toward the ridge dock, towels over shoulders, drinks in hand. As I unloaded my duffel, 2 of them passed by, chatting. Then one of them stopped mid-sentence, nudging the other. "That's Venus, right? I thought she wasn't invited." I smiled, the first one that felt real in a long time. "No one invites a storm," I said, not looking back. "It just arrives." They said my name in a whisper. I answered with volume. That Saturday morning, the streets around Lake Granby were buzzing. People in sandals and wide-brim hats shuffled through the local market, balancing paper bags of apples, jars of honey, and overpriced soaps wrapped in twine. I'd walked that market before, years ago, but this time, I wasn't invisible. I passed a booth selling framed lake photographs when I heard someone say my name. "Venus?" I turned. It was Clara, my cousin's wife. Behind her stood Daniel, one of the new Ridge partners Dad had brought in years ago. Their expressions flickered between recognition and discomfort. "Didn't expect to see you here," Clara said, a tight smile forced onto her face. I didn't flinch. "That makes 2 of us. They didn't ask why I was in town. They didn't invite me to join them." Clara gave a little nod and turned away, already halfway down the path before Daniel caught up with her. As I watched their backs fade into the crowd, I realized something. I no longer needed permission to exist in a place that used to belong to all of us. That afternoon, the retreat's legacy presentation was set to take place. I knew because it had been listed in the online press kit. A glossy, curated agenda of family-centric speeches, art unveilings, and Ridge reflections. It was the sort of thing Dad always loved, public affirmation dressed up as sentimentality. I parked near the side road that led up to Ridge House. I didn't wear anything flashy. Jeans, Neutral blouse, hair tied back. Nothing that could be spun as dramatic or hostile. As I approached the back of the crowd, Lorraine's voice echoed through the microphone. She stood confidently on a small wooden platform beneath a white canopy, flanked by two banners. One with the Ridge Tree crest, my tree crest, and another with the slogan, Legacy, Loyalty, Love. Lorraine smiled, perfect and poised. "We're here today to honor our shared history," she said. "The vision that started with our grandparents, carried by our parents, and shaped now by us, together." I waited. Not because I was nervous. I waited because timing matters. She gestured toward a large mural, just unveiled behind her. My logo again, painted across a paneled wall. Modified, yes, but unmistakably mine. The same curvature, the same color palette, the same brushstroke weight I'd used when I first sketched it in graphite. And then I stepped forward. "You forgot to credit the artist." Her back stiffened before she turned. Murmurs scattered through the audience. Gasps, then silence. I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. I walked calmly toward the edge of the makeshift stage, lifted my tablet, and tapped the screen to reveal a folder. Signed artwork files, email threads, the video of Grandpa naming me as the one to carry the place forward, and, at the very top, a copy of the notarized will. I didn't raise my voice. Signed, dated, witnessed. Before he died, Grandpa made it clear who should hold this space. And what you see behind Lorraine? That's my design, my handwriting, my legacy, rewritten without my consent. Wendell started to move forward from the side, but I held his gaze and didn't budge. His shoulders hesitated, then stiffened. He stopped. Lorraine, still holding the mic, tried to recover. "This isn't the time or place," she said, her voice cracking for the first time. "It's the exact time," I answered. "You chose the stage. You chose the image. I'm just standing where I belong." A beat of silence followed. Then a child's voice broke it. "Is that the lady from the video you told us not to mention?" Everyone turned. It was Tommy, Lorraine's son. He stood near the front row, holding a cup of lemonade, looking up with innocent confusion. "She's in Grandpa's video, the one where he said she'd take care of the lake house." Laughter, soft, unsure, broke across the gathering like a ripple. Someone near the back pulled out a phone. I saw the red recording light blink. That was the moment the Ridge legacy cracked. Two cousins walked out. An aunt stared directly at Dad. Another guest whispered something, then followed behind. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just said, "If you want a legacy that matters, start by telling the full story." And then, without looking back, I walked away. By the time I reached my car, the crowd was buzzing with speculation. The whispers I'd once been afraid of were now out loud. As I placed my tablet on the passenger seat and reached for my keys, my phone vibrated. A voicemail. From Dad. I didn't press play right away. I stared at the screen, letting the moment settle. Then I sat in the driver's seat, turned the key to accessory mode, and let the air conditioning hum softly around me. His voice, muffled but clear, played over the speaker. "We need to talk, not about damage control, about what I got wrong." I didn't react, not yet, because something had shifted, and I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I didn't go back to the retreat. I didn't need to. The next morning, I let myself sleep in for the first time in weeks. The sun was already high by the time I opened the windows at the cabin. The lake shimmered just beyond the trees, and for a moment, I stood there barefoot, coffee in hand, breathing it all in. No sound of distant speeches, no forced laughter, no passive-aggressive small talk served over quiche. Just quiet. The good kind. There were no messages from Lorraine, not even a follow-up to the text I'd sent. Dad had called again, once, but didn't leave a voicemail this time. That silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. I wasn't surprised. A little after 10, there was a soft knock at the door. I knew who it was before I opened it. Jolene stood there, holding a glass pie dish wrapped in a towel. She looked exactly like the last time I saw her. Flawless, a little over-accessorized for a lakeside brunch, but still Jolene. "I wasn't sure if I'd be welcome," she said, voice cautious. I didn't fake a smile. Didn't say, "Of course." I just opened the door wider and said, "Come in. The people who show up late still showed up. That's more than most." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since pulling into the driveway. Inside, the table was already set. Nothing fancy. Folded napkins, a carafe of coffee, a half-warm frittata. Two cousins, Seth and Marcy, were already seated. They'd arrived quietly earlier that morning, no fanfare. Just a text. "Where's the cabin?" And a knock 20 minutes later. We didn't need music, or decorations, or speeches. We just sat and ate. Jolene placed the pie in the center and sat down slowly. For the first 15 minutes, we didn't talk about Ridge House or Lorraine or anything heavy. We talked about movies, about a raccoon Marcy swore had followed her to the car. We laughed. It was simple. Strange how rare that feels now. Eventually, Jolene glanced up at me, hands clasped in her lap. "I'm sorry," she said. I nodded once. Let the words sit there. "I took the contract," she continued, "because it was easy, because I thought you weren't in the picture. I figured if they weren't including you, maybe it was mutual." "They told you I stepped back," I said. "Not a question." She nodded. "They said you didn't want the responsibility, that you weren't stable enough to handle the pressure of a legacy event." I didn't answer right away. I poured myself another cup of coffee, let the heat of the mug settle in my palms. "You're not the only one," I said finally, "who signed something without reading the fine print." She blinked at that, then gave a small laugh. Not mocking, just knowing. The thing about betrayal isn't always the act, it's who watches it happen and doesn't flinch. Jolene had looked away once, but she'd looked back. That counted for something. After brunch, Marcy helped me wash dishes. Seth offered to sweep the deck. Jolene lingered near the edge of the porch, her arms crossed as she stared out toward the water. "I used to think being near them meant being in the family," she said quietly. "Now I think I just wanted to be close to the center of the story." I didn't offer her comfort. She wasn't asking for it. We both knew how it felt to be on the outside looking in. Only now, I was choosing that view. Only 3 people came to my version of the retreat. There were no press photos, no social media tags, no carefully curated speeches about heritage or vision. Just conversation, laughter, the clink of forks against ceramic. And when I showed them my original sketchbook, the early drafts of the ridge crest, the notes in Grandpa's handwriting, no one asked if it was a shared family creation. No one tried to explain it away. They just listened. That's what I'd been missing. Not approval, not applause. Just presence. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I just wanted someone to sit in the room and see me. A little after 2, I checked my email. Subject line: Ridge Legacy Feedback Survey. The automated message thanked me for attending this year's event and offered a 5-question form to evaluate the retreat experience. I stared at the email for a solid minute before laughing. Deep, genuine. I deleted it without reading the rest. Later that evening, after the last coffee cups were rinsed and everyone had packed up, I went to my bag and pulled out 2 padded envelopes. One addressed to a journalist I trusted, someone who once interviewed me about design ethics and branding. The other for my family's informal archivist, Aunt June, who ran a private website collecting Ridge history. I didn't write a dramatic cover letter. No ultimatum. Just a short line tucked into each envelope. If anyone ever wants the full story, this is where it lives. I wasn't rewriting their version. I was anchoring mine. As the sun began to set, painting the water in burnt gold, Jolene stayed behind a little longer. We sat on the steps in silence, sipping tea. She finally asked, "So, will you ever go back?" I didn't answer right away. I finished my cup, set it down beside me. "Not unless I'm coming to buy the place," I said, without a trace of humor. The drive back to Denver was quiet. No podcasts, no playlists, just the hum of the highway beneath my tires and the occasional highway sign pulling me forward. I didn't replay the retreat in my head. I didn't think about the mural or the faces that turned when I spoke, or even the voicemail from my father. I let it all sit in the back seat, like old luggage I had no intention of unpacking again. By the time I reached my apartment, the Sunday sun was dipping low, casting shadows across the floor. The place smelled faintly of dust and peppermint, the last candle I'd burned still lingering in the walls. I walked in slowly, set my bags down, and stood in the middle of my living room. Everything felt exactly as I'd left it. And yet, everything had changed. There were no flowers waiting, no messages of congratulations, no triumphant victory playlist, just my own quiet space, my shelves, my books, my sketchbooks lined up in a neat row, my name, uninterrupted, untouched. 2 days later, a letter arrived, certified mail. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with a logo I recognized in an instant, Ridge Legal Holdings. Inside, a formal notice. The Ridge property had been listed for sale. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but the paperwork said otherwise. The documents were dated a month ago, right around the time Lorraine had unveiled her legacy plan. My name didn't appear once. Apparently, I'd been removed from the ownership ledger last year. Quietly, no notification, no legal challenge, just erased. But I wasn't the same woman I'd been a year ago. I sent a single email to my lawyer, attached everything, again. The video, the will, the paperwork. Within 48 hours, the listing was pulled. I didn't have to threaten. I didn't have to beg. I just had to remind them I still existed. That small, undeniable fact was no longer negotiable. What followed wasn't dramatic. No family conference call. No apology dinner. Lorraine didn't reach out. And honestly, I didn't expect her to. Dad, however, did send an email. Just one line. I regret letting fear decide who deserved to belong. There was no greeting, no signature. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The man who once said I was too emotional to handle pressure had admitted something I never thought he would. I was never the problem. He was just afraid of what it meant to include someone who didn't follow his script. Later that week, one of my younger cousins posted a photo online. It was of us, years ago, sitting on the ridge dock with sketchbooks in our laps. She'd tagged me for the first time in over 5 years. No caption full of hashtags, just 6 quiet words. The one who remembered the truth. That was the first time I cried. Not from pain, but from something that looked a lot like release. Of course, the scars remained. I still flinch when I hear the Ridge name in conversation. I still check the guest list twice before agreeing to any family event. I still can't bring myself to attend Thanksgiving. Not yet. But I've learned that some wounds aren't meant to be forgotten. They're meant to be remembered with care, so they don't reopen. And sometimes, the very thing that hurt you becomes the map for how you'll live going forward. 1 month after the retreat, I gave a talk at a local art school. The invitation came from a professor who'd read an article about legacy and branding. He didn't know the full story, didn't need to. He asked if I'd speak on creative integrity, especially in complicated environments. I stood in front of 30 students, most of them still trying to figure out what kind of artist they wanted to be. I told them about ownership, not just legal, but emotional, the kind that no one else has the right to edit. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. Afterward, a student, young, curly-haired, probably no older than 20, raised her hand and asked gently, "How did you forgive them?" I paused. Then I answered honestly, "I didn't. I just stopped waiting for them to change." That answer sat in the room like something sacred. Nobody clapped. But I saw nods. Quiet, slow. The kind that comes from lived experience. Later that week, I passed a storefront near Union Station. A new tourist shop had opened up, selling branded mugs and t-shirts with Granby Strong printed across the front. One shirt caught my eye. It said, "Legacy is earned, not inherited." I smiled. Not a dramatic smile, not a triumphant grin. Just soft. Real. Because some inheritances don't come in deeds or bank accounts. Some walk beside you until you stop asking for them and start becoming them.